Hello and welcome to the One Way to Do It podcast, presented by Genius Move Audio Academy. My name is Paul Brewer, and in this podcast I chat to audio professionals about their skills. Please visit geniusmove.ie for more details on the Academy. Mastering engineer John Webber is my guest today. He's based at Air Studio in London, originally owned by George Martin of Beatles fame. John became a mastering engineer somewhat by chance, as the podcast will reveal. We dived straight into our chat, but did retrace our steps a bit as we went along. He spoke to me recently one morning from a shared room at Air. So are you in work now?
I am, yep. I usually get here around half seven.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, cheapers. Is that to avoid the traffic, or is that the workload? Or
No, we do shifts, so we're like here sort of day on, day off.
Oh, right.
So we do long days. We do quite long days.
How are the ears then at the end of a long day?
Yeah, it can be a bit fatiguing, but I tend to listen quite low level anyway, and I calibrate my monitoring as well. So
when you say calibrate,
so every time I add gain to a master or change the level of the audio, I back it off by the same amount that I've added. So I'm still always listening at the same level.
Oh, right, okay.
So, yes, so we just like calibrate it with a mic to 80 dB SPL, and then that way I can always return to the same volume, and that helps with the fatigue. Yeah, as well as decision making, because obviously not colouring your ears with different levels too much. Obviously, it's not too rigid. Like if you want to blast it for the client or see how it sounds loud, then we do that too. Monitoring, we've got ATCs 150s, which I've had for like 5 years. Like this room is quite new. Like we only built it 2 years ago.
Right.
I'm not sure if you know. I'm not sure if you know much about the history of the recent history of air mastering and what the changes have occurred over the last few years. But
I've been in Air, but I've never been to the mastering suite. So, so and Barry Grint is there as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So basically, the history is I started working here 11 years ago with Ray Staff when Matt Colton left, and we were just sort of a one-man band operation, sort of pushed to the back of the building, and it was back then there was no sort of like reinvestment into the company or we had no sort of management as such. It was just sort of me and Ray just going about our business word of mouth basically. And then I think like about 3 years ago, sort of 4 years ago, just before lockdown, Air so there's been a lot of refurbishment at Air in general with the new owners. I say new, but within the last 5 years, they bought the company. And they acquired Alchemy Mastering, which was owned by Barry.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And Phil, who's here. And then they moved over from Hammersmith to here, and we've amalgamated into one big mastering department.
Right. So how many master engineers are there now?
There's 5 of us.
5?
I know, that's too many mastering engineers in one place, which is probably why they stagger our days,
Right, okay. So... And when you say stagger the days, does that mean that somebody else uses your room when you're not there, or is it?
Yeah, so I share with the younger engineer Jasper, and we do a day on, day off. That's basically how it works.
Wow.
Or doesn't, because when you're really busy, a day on, day off thing doesn't, always work, but by and large it does. And that's how a lot of the studios operate. I mean, Metropolis work in that way, so do Abbey Road with their mastering engineers, so with most of them. That
seems like an awful amount of work for you to be doing in a day. It would appear like, just as an outside observer.
What's weird is if I was working every day like I used to, which I do still kind of work every day, but I'd probably still be here 10 hours a day anyway. So, but yeah, sometimes I'm a busy guy, and sometimes I'm having to get here at 7 and leave it at 10, you have to kind of stagger what you're doing. I mean, it's very hard if you're constantly mastering, and you're doing the full analytical listening all day.
Yeah.
You kind of break it up with, take short breaks and vinyl cutting. Obviously, when you're doing that, you kind of setting it up and you're doing a bit of listening, but then obviously you can have it quite low on playback while it's actually doing the cut, and sort of gives your ears a bit of a rest that way.
Right, yeah.
doing admin, running out parts, that sort of stuff. You can sort of break up the actual listening part with it. But yeah, they can be quite long days.
Right, yeah. Now, we sort of dived into this straight away. Now, and we haven't
Yeah.
really covered the background.
Mm-hmm.
You're in Air Studios,
I am, yes.
which, what was about 5 or 6 years ago, was taken over by a new owner, was that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was,
And I remember when I was there, Tim Vinelot was there. Were you around that time?
yeah, I
Or?
know Tim. Yeah. He left. I think Tim left about 6 or 7 years ago.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. It's all just, I don't know. It's all mashed into one.
So I was looking on your Air, bio, and like I wouldn't have thought that the whole mastering thing would be so busy now with everybody, banging into their limiter and skipping mastering as a process. But that isn't the case, really, is it? There seems to be an awful lot more to keep you guys busy.
Yeah, we are busy. I mean, I accept there's an element of people doing it themselves, or the budgets are not there to hire a mastering engineer. That doesn't mean we're not a relevant part of the process. And if people want us, we're here. And there's still an element of understanding kind of how things will translate from studio to whatever platform or format it's going to be released on. And I think we should be trusted with that process and work closely with the people that have made the record, the engineers and the mixers, the producers, to actually help them achieve that sound.
So what percentage of your work is vinyl then?
I think it's about 30%. I mean, some engineers do more cutting than others. I tend to just cut stuff that I've mastered. Whereas a lot of the other guys will kind of have sort of cutting clients and kind of cut stuff that's come from elsewhere. Stuff that's been, like, for example, mastered in the States. That these are like a European release. Like, we'll get sent the masters and have to cut them here and then ship them out to factories within Europe. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of sort of making parts and additional formats for the major record companies. So we do a lot of that sort of work.
I notice as well there's quite a lot of legacy stuff, older stuff. How does that all work now?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of vinyl, it's kind of a mix, really. Quite often, with legacy stuff, you have, and reissues. So Phil kind of specialises in reissue stuff.
Who's Phil now? Sorry,
Phil Kinnard. He was a partner in Alchemy,
right?
So he's one of the So he's the guy who does a lot of sort of like kind of transfers and does a lot of stuff for Demon, and sort of specialises in that sort of reissue area. And we all do a little bit, but it's kind of only a small amount of what I do, really. Yeah, so I mean, I don't do too much of that. I mean, I work with some legacy artists, on new releases. Been involved with Bowie and George Michael specifically, and that's kind of part work that I continue to do on a daily basis almost with some of it. Legacy stuff is like bread and butter work, there are always going to be, new releases around those back catalogues. So it's a good way for us to earn money and keep thriving and moving the business, keeping the business rolling.
Right. So like the legacy stuff, is that a bunch of work that's there, and then when you have a quiet period, you will do it, and that sort of thing keeps the diary full, as it were.
It keeps the diary, ticking over and full, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's something we could just pick up, and it still have deadlines and release times to meet and capacity in the factory they have to kind of adhere to. The slots at the pressing plants, for example.
Right.
We take it as it comes, basically, and people are happy. They keep coming back, and some clients come back at a higher frequency than others,
Yeah.
When you're doing like frontline stuff or new records, like you might only like work with someone once a year until they release a new album, and there's the big time gaps between it. That's why, as a mastering engineer, it takes so many years to build up your client base.
Right.
You work with an artist, they release an album once a year, they're not giving you loads of work. Whereas, you're working with a record company that has a back catalogue, a higher turnover of projects.
Right. Okay. How did you learn the vinyl thing?
From an age-old wizard called Ray Staff.
Oh yes, indeed.
I was working, going back to the full history of it. I started mastering in just when I left university, so 2006, I'm going to say. And I worked for a guy who had a production room, and we were doing a bit of mixing with this artist who was signed to Sony at the time. And he ran a CD brokerage, and he used to get a lot of requests for mastering.
What's a CD brokerage? Tell me what that is.
He takes orders for CD manufacturing, basically, and then
Right.
sorts out the artwork and takes the order, and then liaises with the pressing factory that will create the glass master and make the final copies. So he's sort of like a middleman, a broker, and there's a lot of those guys around today, especially with vinyl. But anyway, he used to get a lot of requests for CD mastering. I'm not sure what they if they needed it or not. So that was kind of my in point into the mastering. He was like, "Shall we just set this up as mastering?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." It was work. I needed the money, just like university, and I didn't really want to be a mastering engineer. I wasn't that interested in it, to be honest with you. I wanted to be a mega superstar producer.
Gosh,
and then it sort of took off from there. And back then, YouTube wasn't the resource it is now, and so I kind of research into it was to. So we were above Funky Junk on Hornsey Road, and those guys were a massive help to us at the time. So we're like, what gear do mastering engineers use? Like, can I use this SSL G series compressor that I've got? And they were like, no, not really. They don't tend to use that. That's more of the mixers. I was like, oh, okay. And then we actually like got some tracks that we mixed, and I went around to various mastering studios in London at the time, for I think 360 Mastering. I think I went in there with Dick, and just like it was sort of like a reconnaissance mission, just sort of looking at what gear he had and sort of watching what kind of moves he made and what speakers they had and writing it all down, and we sort of pieced it together ourselves. And the guy who ran the company that did the CD brokerage, Alex, he backed it with the money and we sold a lot of the gear in the studio and turned it into a mastering room. So I was sort of self-taught, and then we didn't do vinyl. And then when I started working at Air 11 years ago, that's when I hooked up with Ray. I mean, this is quite a long answer to your question. And then Ray taught me how to cut vinyl, and it puts a new perspective on how you actually master everything.
Yeah. Are all the current vinyl cutters in the mastering scene, did they all learn like that? Is that the thing? Is that the thing that's going on? Because I can't see.
Yeah, I think they all learned from Ray.
Oh, right, okay.
I think even Barry learned from Ray.
Oh, right.
You know, Ray must be doing very well. He must use some pretty good moisturizer, because by my calculations, he's 110.
All right, okay.
So he taught everyone. So it's just standard that Ray would teach you how to cut.
What equipment are you using then? Is it a Neumann lathe or?
Yeah, we've got a Neumann VMS 80, which has been fully upgraded to the modern specs. It has modifications of the power supply, which has been taken out of its rack and externalized. Everything's been recapped. There's been some upgrades to some of the cards that control the feedback going to the head. There's also half-speed mods, so we do a lot of half-speed cutting. You could ask me what half-speed is. And then on the back end we can still play back off tape if we need to. If people want to do that, hardly anyone does. But we tend to have a Sequoia on the back end, which is a DAW made by Magix. We also make Samplitude. Mastering engineers tend to use PCs because we're odd, and that kind of plays back everything. And then I've got a lot of gear, because as I said, I do a lot of mastering rather than cutting in here. So, I mean, am I allowed to move the screen around?
Absolutely, yeah.
If that's a tool.
So how big is your room then?
A lot smaller than it is the footprint, because we've got like these acoustic panels going all the way around.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably a 6x5.
All right, okay. It's still big enough though.
Okay, right. So there's our Sequoia. There's our monitors. Oh yeah, there's the lathe corner. Okay, that's kind of my tube rack.
Right.
That's my tube rack. So I've got a Manley Massive Passive, a Thermonic Culture, Phoenix Mastering Plus version, and then I've got various converters down here.
A crane sound, yes.
Two heads for playback. Then I've got a head and a
burl as well,
and a bowl for capture for the analog to digital side.
Oh right.
Other bits. So I've got my TG. crane song compressor. Just got a lot of Dangerous Music gear there, and we've got like a Dangerous Liaison at the bottom, which sort of acts as a posh insert box / console.
Right.
And then we've got a crane song Avocet for monitoring.
Right. Would that be sort of standard within the industry? Would that be?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's still stuff that's used in mastering rooms. I mean, everyone has their own preferences. Yeah. But yeah, I'd say it's all relatively standard. A lot of people use Sequoia now for the software. Seeing the Sadie, it's sort of died off a bit. I quite like boxes that add a bit of colour and a bit of interest to the sound. I encourage people to give me mixes that have some headroom on them, so we can actually add something, explore the sound, not just kind of level it up and then send them back the same thing they sent me. I think it's nice to get creative. I think mastering is a creative endeavour, part of the creative process, and I like to have a range of equipment which gives you a different range of colour palettes, basically, in regards to sound. That's kind of my philosophy.
Absolutely, yeah. Your client base, is it primarily record companies and stuff like that, or do you get a lot of chaps like me who sent you some stuff years ago to do some stuff as well? Like, how does that all work?
Well, my personal client base is very mixed, to be honest with you. Tend to, like, at the moment I'm doing a lot of kind of bands that are these sort of Radio 6 bands, and legacy artists. I don't really seem to do too much in the middle at the moment, but it does change. I do some front end stuff for the majors, but not loads. And I tend to work quite a lot with the indie labels. Yeah.
Let's talk about a Radio 6 band. What sort of quality of master are you getting from them?
Usually I'm working with the mix engineers.
Right.
In fact, a lot of that work does come from the mix engineers and the producers directly, rather than and then you work with because the indie labels don't seem to actually directly dish out the mastering work in the same way that the majors do.
Is that because they don't feel the need?
Well, no, they just work with whoever. They tend to be more open to working with the people that the artist wants to work with and their people. So a lot of my referrals come from the producers or the mixers, to be honest with you. And I'm sure that works across the board. But yeah, I mean, most of the stuff I tend to get from the majors. Some of it is referred in that same way. But more so I seem to be dealing with the A&R or like the artist management on that level, rather than the producers and the mixers on the more sort of indie label kind of level.
If you get a mix from band A and you think, oh my God, what have they done there? There's a huge amount of bass or there's a huge hole in it or something. Will you go back to the mixer and offer him the option of pre-correcting it?
Yeah, totally. That is
right.
That is so much more effective than you trying to fix it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
When there's a problem outside of what's normal, because it's so easy for people to open a file these days and just make a couple of quick edits. And
right.
I think that might be the reason you get these referrals from people, earlier in the chain who are involved in making mixing the record and producing the record. Because you build up that sort of rapport and that relationship with them, where you can relay notes and bounce ideas off each other. One of the most common things we get asked is, how was my mix? Please give me feedback on the mix. And, a lot of people that tend to ask that are actually pretty good mixers. Because everyone, people who care tend to do a good job, and there isn't usually too much to report. I mean, if there is an issue, I'd usually go back to them anyway and say, look, maybe try this. But yeah, I mean, the great thing about doing this job is actually you get to sort of push things along and help recordings on all levels. I mean, you might have someone who's kind of starting out or hasn't mixed a track before, and they are doing quite sort of broad things that don't kind of gel, and you can go back and relay that information to them, and it's it helps them massively, and they really appreciate it.
And it helps you, of course, as well.
Yeah, it makes my job easier if you go and sort it out. Do you know what I mean? But it's it's not necessarily about that. It's about having it's just that old thing. Is that the earlier in the chain that it's right. By the time it gets to the end, and I'm at the end of the process, it's going to come out of the wash and sound good. You don't want to be fixing problems. You want to be sweetening the sound and emphasizing things that are already good about the mix and the music, not fixing problems.
Right, yeah, because that was the thing I was wondering, like how much of your work is fixing, essentially.
Not a great deal. I mean, the quality of a recording these days is vastly improved than it was even 10, 15 years ago. You can make a passable track on your iPhone these days in terms of actual sound quality, you know. It's all just tiny percentages here and there. And, you know, and also what does the music need? Not everything needs to sound hi-fi and sweet sounding. Sometimes things should be lo-fi or aggressive or in your face or grungy or whatever. You know, it's all about the artistic intention. I mean, you're working with the mixers, and you know they as you get more experience in this, and I've been doing this for quite a long time now, you tend to work with people that are on a similar path, and you know, kind of, I'm not going to say necessarily at your level, but you know, they're as experienced as you are, and you tend to you know, get better sounding mixes on average the older you get, I find. I mean, when I first started off mastering, as I said, like, it was from that CD brokerage with people that were probably quite independent, and being independent sort of 12, 15, 13 years ago was a lot different from it is now in terms of the resources you have available to you, the quality of the products you can achieve was vastly different back then. And also, people used to have to like go into studios, spend money on for it to be mixed on a desk. The mix is printed. That's the end of your session. You couldn't, you know, as readily just go and open a file and make a couple of changes. So back then, I was fixing a lot more problems than I am these days.
Right. Okay. And do you ever have situations where a lad will come in, you know, attend a session and then pull out a laptop and make a change and send you a new master kind of thing? Or a new pre-master?
All the time. It's
Right.
so common. And I actually encourage people to come in and do attending sessions, especially when it's like the first time we work together. I think it's a really good opportunity for them to hear their music in this environment, and for us to build up an understanding of each other's expectations, and for me to sort of directly interact with them and their music. So quite often they are rocking up with like a little mini mix rig and jumping in and changing files. That is quite common.
Right. So, like, when you say your job is mastering, it's now gone back further into the process, really, isn't it? You're sort of
it's kind of
assistant mixing.
Well, I always think of it as mixed consultation. Like you're offering, and all you're doing is offering your opinion. It's not necessarily right or wrong. And you know, as time goes by, people will either like my opinion or they don't. And as I say, that's what, again, another reason why it takes many years of doing this to build up clients, and to maybe become a bit more cultured within yourself as well, and actually, you know, focus your own tastes and opinions based on the experience.
And would you consider yourself a Radio 6 band?
No, I just consider myself a mastering engineer. I mean, I do, I do everything. Bands, you know, I work with, let's say, as you said, legacy artists. You know, I could do some more. I could do a little bit of major record company stuff here and there, like, you know, Frontline. I work with all the formats. I mean, I did a record last year where it was by an artist called Fink, and it was recorded in by a company called Low Swing Records in Germany, and the whole record was just pure analog. There was no computers. It was recorded to multi-track tape, mixed down to 2-track, and then we cut it here to vinyl. The guy sort of personally flew the tapes over, and we cut it here straight off a tape machine to vinyl. I mean, there's lots of interesting things within the mastering world. I've also been getting involved with Dolby Atmos a little bit, even though mastering engineers don't tend to work on Dolby Atmos. For some reason they do in America, but not so much in the UK. It hasn't really caught on to do with budgets and the way people work. But
and have you an Atmos room there?
Yeah, so we have 2 Atmos rooms at Air, so I will go in there when I'm in. It tends to be records where I've mastered the stereo, and they ask me to work on other formats. You don't really want to give that, you know, it's not about, you know, gatekeeping, but it's like you don't want someone else to do it when you would rather oversee it yourself. It's about pride in the release and wanting to oversee things, and a lot of it comes down to quality control and make sure it's there's continuity between your other work. So yeah, I've got involved, and that's how I got involved with Atmos, and sort of had to sort of learn by the seat of my pants how to do that, because I've got to tell you that's vastly different from what I do on a day-to-day basis.
And what's your opinion on Atmos then? Is it going to be a winner, do you think?
I think it could sound great in an Atmos environment in the studio. For me, it's all about how it's going to translate to the end user and how easy it is for the end user to engage with it and enjoy it versus its stereo counterpart. I personally think until Spotify jumps on it, it's not going to really cement itself fully. Just because Apple Music has quite a small share of that streaming world. I mean, the way they're doing it is they're default into the Atmos product, and also not promoting, the algorithm's not promoting released on their store unless a spatial mix has been submitted to Apple. So that's their way of doing it, and they're sort of driving it, really, it seems to me. But if Spotify jump on it, yeah, it could stick around. But I mean, a lot of studios and engineers, they kind of were almost sort of forced, or kind of felt like they had to invest money into the equipment. So there's definitely, I hope it sticks around just for those guys, because they've had to. It's been a big outlay for them, and yeah. I think it's a good product. I think it's something that needs developing further, and it's very young. And
it struck me that it would be the ideal format for a car. The fact that you could have multiple speakers and a locked thing, you wouldn't be dealing with the variable of a home, say.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the Dolby headquarters in Soho, you can actually sit in their car and listen to the Atmos mixes. They have a car just with an Atmos setup in it, and you can go in there and sit in there and have a listen.
What, is the car outside or is it inside?
Yeah, they've got like a sort of side garagey bit where it's where it's parked.
One thing we didn't mention was half-speed mastering for vinyl.
Yes.
How does all that work?
So half-speed mastering, the idea is you take the stress off cutting high frequencies and turn them into mid frequencies, and the lathe takes twice as long to cut those grooves, so you get a better resolution in the high frequencies effectively, and you can get cleaner peaks, so it can play back louder. Quite an old concept, really. They used to get around the sort of mechanical and electrical restraints of the time. I mean, things actually have moved on quite a bit since then, and you got cleaner amps now and better cutting systems, and so that coupled with the half-speed concept can give you a really nice vinyl record. Obviously, if you're turning 10k into 5k, for example, you also turn in your 50 hertz subby kick drum into 25 hertz.
Yes.
And it goes into sort of non-linear part of the electronics. So there is still a degree of testing, and it doesn't always work great on everything. It can sound great on certain things. Like, it's worked really well with so I've been working with Ken Scott quite a lot recently on various Bowie projects, and we've did Aladdin Insane and Ziggy Stardust at half speed. In fact, Ziggy Stardust was one of the first ones I did at half speed, and they come out great.
Was that one of Ken Scott's duos, actually two of them, one in Abbey Road and one up in Scotland? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he does a lot of kind of like we did a talk here at our studios about, so I want to say 5 months ago, and we sat down and we discussed this new box set that we've worked on and various other projects, and discussed the half speed stuff too. And yeah, stuff like that works with rock and roll stuff. It kind of works quite well because the low end isn't too built up or prominent, so it works really well at half speed, especially you've got like David's voice has got like a lot of detail and a lot of like kind of plosives and can be a little bit essy as well, which could be tricky to cut the vinyl. So yeah, I think that's an example of where it can work really well. Whereas if you've got something that's kind of like I did an album last week for a UK indie, which was like kind of experimental techno, and it was just so low end heavy with like little glitchy noises in the rest of the frequency spectrum here and there, and I can't imagine that would work great in half speed. There's just no need for it. It's like anything. It's a bit like with the Atmos stuff as well. It's like, is it too much magic for some styles of music? And absolutely it is. I mean, I did like an Atmos album of a solo piano a couple of months ago, and I was just sort of laughing to myself because it was just stereo with a little bit of like reverb
at the back. Yeah,
reverb at the back. Like we could have done with a surround mix anyway. So
here's a stupid question. Please.
Stupid question's always the best.
Yeah. Does anybody ever...
I have plenty of stupid answers, so...
Yeah, good stuff, yeah. Does anybody ever master on vinyl running the tape and the cutter backwards to reverse into the transients?
Yeah, you can do that on a Scully cutting lathe, and there's been records where you drop the needle at the on the label and it plays backwards to the outer diameter. I don't think you can do it on a VMS 80. But that's possible. And you can also there's all sorts of tricks you can do with cutting vinyl. We can do locked grooves, where it plays a loop, and you could have various drop needle points, so you can have two grooves interlapping with each other. There was I think there was a Monty Python record. Yeah, there was a Monty Python record back in the day. There was always a debate which kind of engineer did it, and but I think Ray claims he did it, and I think it was like and you can drop it on different grooves and it'll play differently. So it'd be like a record within a record, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I've done ones you've got locked grooves. If you got, I can't remember what it was, it's like 1.7 seconds of audio. If you can get it to start on the start of the, so when you cut a record, so it doesn't drop, so the needle doesn't drop onto the label, you'll cut a concentric groove at the end of the record called a locked groove. So just keep going round and round. So if you at 33 1/3 RPM, if you get a piece of audio which is 1.7 seconds and you manage to get it to start at the right time, it will perfectly loop. So I've done that on a couple of records before.
And how many attempts did that take to do it?
Actually, it wasn't too bad. I got a scrap lacquer and practiced it. There's various different ways of doing it. The way I got it set up is I'll make sure that my DAW has a low buffer setting, so there's no delay on the playback, and I'll have the loop on a hotkey, so and there's a light that comes on the panel which tells you that the lock groove is about to start cutting. So as soon as I see that come on, I press the hotkey and then it plays the loop. It's just problem solving. There's nothing.
And it is very interesting. Like, I didn't know all these things. I just imagined you were just mastering stuff all day, but it's more than that, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I get bored of getting. That's probably why I've got so many EQs. I just get bored every now and again, and have to get a new bit of gear. Try and persuade her that I need it. So this does something different. This does something different than these other three EQs. There's some truth in that, and sometimes it's the colour of the panel.
So that's John Webber's way to do it. Many thanks to him for taking the time to chat over the internet with me. Please go to geniusmove.ie to find out about my courses. Thanks for listening.